one of the major issues that I've had during my career managing construction projects is utilities. You'll hit something that you don't know that's there. You'll get in a situation during construction, and you've done your boring, and you think you know where the utilities are. You've had your utility coordinators out there and pulling all the data by hand to try to figure out what's under the ground. And then back in 1965, they had a tree in the way, and so they put a bend in the pipe and then routed around the tree, and the tree's long gone, died, or they cut it down, whatever. And then you assume that they're put the pipe in straight, and then the contractor tries to put a footing for a bridge right in that location, and you hit something. And that causes delay. It causes extra cost to the owner. It doesn't make the contractor happy, and the designer's under pressure. And so those are really the situations where you can utilize big data or analytics to try to get a better picture. That is a good thing.
Welcome to Convos with Chris, inside the minds of infrastructure experts, where I dive deep with industry leaders redefining how we plan, design, build, and deliver future-proof infrastructure through AI and innovation. I'm your host, Chris Garafola, Head of Content at 4M. Hi everyone, Chris here, Head of Content at 4M Analytics, where your utility research and project planning begins. I'm excited to be joined today by Randy Iwasaki, speaker, executive, and now founder of his own firm, Iwasaki Consulting, providing strategic advice and technical innovative solutions to founders, entrepreneurs, and C-level executives focusing on transportation technology and organizational growth. Randy's vast experience includes serving as the Director of Transportation at Caltrans, where he was responsible for overseeing the operation of California's state transportation system, and as the Executive Director at Contra Costa Transportation Authority. Randy also recently joined 4M as one of our new Board of Advisors. Randy, I want to thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation. You're a very busy man, so thank you so much.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Chris, for the invitation.
Of course. Why don't you tell the audience just a little bit more about yourself, where you're calling in from, your career journey, and what got you to where you are today?
Sure. I live in the Bay Area, in Walnut Creek, California. I'm a registered civil engineer. I went to school at Cal Poly, did my undergraduate at Cal Poly, and people ask me, much like what you just asked me about my career, and one of the reasons why I became a civil engineer is my uncle taught at Colorado State University, and he's a civil engineering professor. And so during some summers, we used to travel to Colorado to visit my auntie and uncle and my cousins. And my uncle used to take me to the lab at Colorado State, and they did he was a PhD in hydraulics, and so he did the wind analysis on candlestick, on when they enclosed candlestick. And then his other big project that I saw was the erosion on the Colorado River. And these are mock-ups, but very large scale for a little kid. And I was really impressed. And I said, if my uncle can do that, I can do that. And so I made a career choice at a younger age and said, I want to be a civil engineer. People ask me, what does a civil engineer do? And I said, I don't know, my uncle does it, so I think I can do it as well. And then went to Cal Poly and graduated and started at Caltrans, and it started as an entry-level civil engineer. And Caltrans has this fantastic rotation program, which allows planners or engineers or administrators to understand how the department works by rotating throughout that department for the first couple of years. You have to go through design, and we'll talk a little bit more about design today, I'm sure, but you also have to rotate through construction, and so you have some electives. And so I went through some hydraulics and some other elective rotation programs, and then set up in design, and then I got registered as a civil engineer in California, and Caltrans brought all the newly registered civil engineers into the conference room in Fresno, California, where I started District 6, and said, you're going here. And when they got to me, they said, you're going to construction as a resident engineer. And I said, there must be some mistake here, because I'm a designer. I'm not a resident engineer, although I did rotate through construction. And I did like construction. And they said, well, if you want to move up in the organization, and all these different reasons of why it's important to go to construction, none of which made any sense or matter to me. All I want to do is be a registered civil engineer and make $3,000 a month, because when I started, I made $1,461 a month. So I figured if I could double my salary, I'd be a little less rich than Warren Buffett, but had enough money to maintain my lifestyle, which is work most of the time when you first started out at Caltrans in those days.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually made my way up to, I was appointed as the director during the recall right after Governor Schwarzenegger first got elected. And I then ultimately was appointed as the director of Caltrans. I held every civil service classification at Caltrans except for principal transportation engineer. And then I got recruited to go to the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, so I ran that for a little over a decade. And there we oversaw all aspects, all phases of project delivery from planning all the way through construction. And we had a staff of 19 people I say that work, and then me as the executive director. And we had a really good team, really good teamwork, and we delivered about $1.5 billion worth of construction on the state highway system, interstate system in Contra Costa County. And then I retired to collect my pension and then got recruited to lead the transportation vertical, a newly spun up vertical that focused on transportation at Amazon Web Services. So I did that for about 2.5 years. And then I started my own business, Iwasaki Consulting Services. So that's where I am today.
Wow. Yeah, you have a wealth of knowledge, so people didn't want you to retire so quickly. They wanted
you can't collect retirement unless you retire.
Yeah. Oh man. I know that's a quick way of, you have obviously a vast experience, vast knowledge. So that was a very quick overview. One thing I was looking at your bio before we were talking offline is how you oversaw over 20,000 people at Caltrans. That's wild. It's fathomable for me to think about. That's a lot of responsibility, overseeing that many people, and the budget that you oversaw too at Caltrans at the time, it was around 14 billion, and we were talking about like today's dollars, that's maybe like around $18 billion. That's a lot of responsibility. You're obviously very, very humble and modest here. But over your career, is there anything that really resonates with you or stands out in terms of a milestone, whether it's one or two milestones from your career, from projects that you've worked on? Obviously, you've worked on some major projects over the years.
I think a personal milestone was when I got registered. So if you're listening and you're a student trying to become a civil engineer, you need to get registered. You need to take that. And it's not called the EIT anymore, engineering training. I think it's called something else. But you need to take that pre-exam, and then you need to take the exam to get registered as a civil engineer. I liken it to a ticket to ride. It's like an airplane ticket in your career. Once you get registered, you can go and work in different facets of civil engineering, but you need that license to do that. So I think that's really important. From a project perspective, there's been a lot of projects over 40 plus years. And I think the big one was the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge, the East Span. It was a replacement. It was damaged in the 𝘠𝘯𝘧𝘠𝘠 earthquake in 1989. And the frames had separated and the top deck dropped onto the lower deck, which I guess it was designed to do that. And so we went through an analysis on retrofitting versus replacement, and it was determined to replace that structure. So in 2001, I was the deputy director for maintenance and operations, and I was sent to District 4 to be the interim district director to get the bridge under construction. There was three punch list items I had to do. One, put a new management team in place. Number two is fix the relationship that District 4, the Oakland, San Francisco Bay Area district had with the media, and then get the bridge under construction. And so we needed a 401 cert, and we needed a 404 clean water permit from the Army Corps. And so I ended up getting that very quickly because we developed a very, very good relationship with the water board and also with the Army Corps. And when you're building ultimately a $6.7 billion structure, there's money in it to do mitigation. So whether we planted eelgrass, I didn't understand if it would take or not. We built beautiful parks underneath to mitigate some of the view shed. Did a lot of different things in there, containment boxes and things like that to kind of control the runoff. And it was a really good project. And so we got the permits. I think we've upheld every one of our agreements on those permit requirements. And then we broke ground the next year. So I was supposed to get it under construction in 2001. We broke ground in, I think it was January 22nd or 21st, 2002, and started that project. And there was a lot. You talk about starts and stops. That project started and it was going pretty well. And then you hit certain things and you stopped the projects, and rebuilding the Skyway and got part way out and couldn't make the decision. Do we extend the Skyway all the way out, or did we build that signature span, the main span, which ultimately was codified in law? And the self-anchored suspension bridge was designed and ultimately built. And so this was a very major project in my career. It taught me perseverance. You have to keep continuing on. There was a lot of issues associated with fabrication of not only the steel structure, but also of the templates that allow for pile driving and things like that. And so there's just a host of complexities that when you go to school, you don't learn about these things. That's why I think you have 22,000 employees when you have a state the size of California, and you have a very fantastic bridge construction. District 59 is the bridge department. You had some fantastic people in District 59, as well as District 4, and then headquarters, Met's lab, and things like that. And so there's a lot of teamwork that goes into place, also with the private sector, to get these mega projects built that are very, very complex. And so that was one example. And the other one was when I was the director, we broke ground on the Caldecott Tunnel, the fourth bore of the Caldecott Tunnel. And the budgeted amount was $420. And we ended up delivering that project for $417 million. And we weren't using a tunnel boring machine. We weren't boring uphill. We were boring downhill with the new Austrian tunneling method, or NADM or NADM method. And a great team again, District 4, Contra Costa, our consultants, the bridge department, and ultimately deliver that project on time and a little bit under budget. So those are some really good examples of some major projects that are built, and then they're built to the specs, the standards, but also on time and under budget. The Bay Bridge, when Secretary Sonny Wright McPeak under Governor Schwarzenegger, we actually put a team together and worked day and night for about a week, maybe a little bit longer, on what is the schedule and what is the cost of the bridge, the way it was scoped. And that bridge was built for just a shade under, right around $6.7 billion. And that was the estimate that we came up with, and the schedule that we came up, it was built on that. And there was a lot of complexities on that structure as well.
Yeah, I can imagine trying to figure out the budget for something like that would be extremely difficult. Seems like a lot of variables are involved.
I think that's what intrigued me about 4M, is that part of when you're in the planning phase, in the old days, we used to project study report or project report, and you identify the kind of the area that you're going to affect when you build a new project. You're going to environmentally clear that area. You're going to purchase the right of way in that area. And then you got to figure out what the utilities or those unknown factors are that you can't see. And I think that any time that you get better information to do a better planning study, it's easier to deliver a project on budget. Versus if you don't know what's there and you throw 15% or whatever the number is, the percentage number is to the total contract for your contingency, you're really just shooting. You're like throwing a dart at a dartboard. We just hit 15%, or we hit 17%. Let's just use that. That's good enough. And then when you get out, the designers are finished and it gets over to construction, and then you have design services during construction, and you finish with all the boring. You're going, oh my God, we're still hitting utilities. We're still hitting things that we didn't see before. I think when you get better information, you can make better decisions on your risk register and ultimately on your contingency that then helps the agency deliver those projects for within the right amount of money, versus saying, we don't have enough money to finish. We're going to short the contractor, or don't do this or don't do that. And the project comes out, it doesn't come out exactly the way it should come out. And so I think these kinds of technologies help owners or agencies do better in the planning phase to make sure that their estimates are reasonable.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Randy, for that. That's actually going to segue into my next question. Like, what specifically, and you kind of touched on it a little bit just a moment ago, drew you to 4M? What was that phone call like, or that message like, and what was your initial reaction? Obviously, you probably you didn't know we existed until that one moment when somebody introduced you to 4M. But what was that like? I know I spoke to some of our other new board of advisors, and I think it was 𝘁𝘁𝘁𝑏𝘁 who mentioned this has been the bane of my existence, since I started my career, having to, deal with the impacts that utilities can have on projects. What was it for you specifically that really made you say, I need to be a part of 4M's vision, and I want to keep pushing this vision into the market?
I think this is an interesting question from the perspective of how did I get involved. I got a call from Len Vetrone, and this is where I think networking comes into play. I'm a strong supporter of networking. I've got almost 26,000 people in my iPhone register here.
And you have over, what was it, like 16,000 on LinkedIn. I saw
I know on LinkedIn, but these are people that I hand input. And Len and I worked together. We were on the board of the International Partnering Institute, IPI, together for about a decade. And I get a call out of the blue. Len's saying, "Hey, Randy, I'm advising this company. I think you'd be a good fit for it. Let me tell you more." And I was at the airport. Actually, I was in San Diego at the airport. And so he's talking about this 4M company and the analytics and the big data. And once he said big data, I said, I want to know more. And so Isaac, your CEO, called me and was explaining the technology. And I think Joe also called. Mm-hmm. And so once I talked a little bit more, learned a little bit more about 4M, I was very enthusiastic about being nominated to be on the advisory board. So it was Len after, and I hadn't seen Len for, I don't know, five years probably. And for whatever reason, he called me out of the blue. So he probably has at least 10,000 people in his iPhone.
Wow. Yeah, I don't have that much. I probably talk to my wife and my mom the most. So even if I do have 10,000 contacts,
that's smart.
95% of it.
That's smart. See, that's you're laying the foundation for a long-lasting relationship there.
That's good, because I'm a rookie. I'm 4 years into my marriage, so I know I got a long ways to go. Yeah. So I'm glad that I'm making the right steps. Yeah, that's really interesting how the network effect, because obviously you trust Len, and I know with like new technologies, there's a lot of construction tech out there. And I'm being new to the industry. I can imagine that the industry's been burned through some technologies before that didn't work, or maybe it just didn't really live up to the hype, right? And so there's a lot of construction tech companies out there. The reason you chose 4M, I think, is pretty powerful. Somebody of your stature, your experience in the industry, I think that's really says a lot for 4M, for you wanting to come on board and continue to drive our mission for the industry forward. So, Randy, I had a couple questions specifically just about your experience. So, in your experience with transportation infrastructure development, what's the most significant pain point that keeps coming up?
There's a lot of pain points that come up when you're delivering.
Would you say that
there's
something that's like most significant though? And I know we mentioned you were talking about planning and how if we could have more confidence in the data that we have early on, it can help us plan. Is there anything? Because I know there is a lot. Would you consider something to be more significant, or one of the more significant issues with infrastructure development that maybe technology could help solve some of these challenges?
Yeah, I think that one of the major issues that I've had during my career of managing construction projects is utilities. You'll hit something that you don't know that's there. We widened State Route 4 from the city of Pittsburgh all the way around the bend there. We put an interchange in on Highway 4, Highway 160, and then we widened 4 underneath all the way around, and we prepared the median for the BART extension, and we had enough money to make the bend all the way out to Brentwood to Balfour. And you'll get in the situation during construction, and you've done your boring, and you think you know where the utilities are. You've had your utility coordinators out there and pulling all the data by hand to try to figure out what's under the ground. And then back in 1965, they had a tree in the way, and so they put a bend in the pipe and then routed around the tree, and the tree's long gone, it died, or they cut it down, whatever. And then you assume that they're put the pipe in straight, and then the contractor tries to put a footing for a bridge right in that location, and you hit something. As you're getting ready to start your construction, you realize there's something down there, and that causes delay. It causes extra cost to the owner. It doesn't make the contractor happy, and the designer's under pressure. And so those are really the situations where you can utilize big data or analytics to try to get a better picture. That is a good thing. And it'll be less delay and less angst less friction between the contractor and the owner. And I think any time you can do that, you want the contractors to want to come back and work for you as an owner. You don't want to have somebody prepare a poor set of plans consistently, and then you get less bidders because the contractors are saying, I don't want to bid Randy's work because they don't do good design work, or they don't treat the contractors right. Anything you can do to make that relationship more hand in glove, it's a lot better. Projects go a lot smoother, and everybody's happy at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Including, most importantly, when I was working for Contra Costa, my board. So as the executive director, you report to a board. In my case, it was 11 members, and I wanted to keep at least 6 of them happy every board meeting on once a month on Wednesday, the third Wednesday of the month, so that I could keep my job.
Right. It sounds like in that example that the diligence was done. Like they did the research, and it just, so looking back, it's not like the due diligence wasn't there, but maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, there wasn't the right tools to really do the type of diligence that needed to be done. With maybe a solution like 4M, maybe that would have been able to be mitigated right from your office. Those who have already jumped into our platform already, you know how simple it is to just draw a polygon to see the utility infrastructure underground. So that's interesting, because I hear that a lot, where it's like, well, we've done our diligence, we did everything that we could do, and we still hit something that just didn't show up, whether it was in the records or in that example that you mentioned there. I think there's a lot of cases where it's not that people aren't doing the diligence to see what's underground. It's just you still hit lines.
Well, I'm pretty sure that as you gather all this big data and put it together, and you click a button, and a couple hours or a day later you get all this information, you're probably still going to hit something. But here's the other fold. So one is, I started in design. I started at Caltrans in 1983, June of 1983. I remember the day very well. It's a very hot day. Had to go out and start surveying for the 𝘊𝘰𝐯 earthquake. So put the FEMA trailers in the right locations. So in 1984, my rotation took me to design. And we had 2 utility coordinators in District 6, Ken Cartwright and Don Regal. And when we started a project, we call those guys, and they'd gather all the data. And that's just the way it was done. So the interstate was built using 2, I don't know how many guys or people, but in my day, it was Don Regal and Ken Cartwright.
Wow. And
that's how we started the program. And so we built a lot of the infrastructure with that technique.
With 2 people.
And with people, gathering data from the records, trying to figure out what the utility agreements. The other piece is the utilities that are in there before the freeway, after the freeway. You've got to analyze who has prior rights, all these things. So the agreements, who has to move the utilities when you identify them. So it's not just a matter of identifying the lines on a paper, but you've got the agreements. So it's more complex than just finding the utility. But once you find the utility, that helps lower the risk. But the other piece, I think, today is, with this pressure not to expand government, how do you better utilize your people? And also, how do you recruit people?
Right.
I think is really important for agencies. So I use the hammer and chisel on a rock, and we're not building a Rosetta Stone. And so when I was at Contra Costa Transportation Authority, one day, this is a few years ago, I said, let's go paperless. And it was really focused on reducing the amount of paper we buy and reducing the size of the darn copy machine that used to shake our office, because this thing was big. And we're putting out hundreds of packets for every agenda, for every public meeting. We got to put these paper packets out. But our team, my team, actually said, Randy, we can do better than just the agendas if we can get electronic signatures. So we've got an electronic signature, or it was authorized by the Secretary of State. So now we can sign documents. So we did online bidding. Pretty soon, every set of plans were done digitally. There's no more, in my day, it was highway curves, ink, and vellum. They don't do that anymore. It's all CAD, and it's all digitized. And I think that as you recruit people, young people that are graduating from the universities, colleges, wherever, it's easier to recruit when you're doing things like what they learned in school. And so a lot of this, they're already tinkering with or using. And so then when they get there, they're going, wow, this place is pretty cool, or this place is really ancient. So you got to decide what kind of agency are you running? Are you running a pretty cool agency, or are you running a clunky agency? And then how do you better utilize your staff? So you have all these right-of-way agents. In my day, it was in right-of-way, but it could be somewhere else in your organization. But how do you better utilize those folks rather than going and grab all this data out of or paper and calling the utility companies and doing it the old way versus maybe doing it a better way, faster way to better utilize your time? And then you can take that extra time that you've gained to run through the data with a fine-tooth comb if you want to do that.
Right. And do more of the strategic tasks. I think a lot of people are just hesitant at first with innovation in AI. It's just because it can have this concept or this notion that's going to replace people potentially. But what do you think about that? Is it more of a replacing or more of like an augmentation to that, as you mentioned, where it's like it's augmenting the role, it's augmenting the job, increasing the efficiencies, empowering those professionals to then focus on more of the strategic tasks versus some of the manual, mundane, say, record research in this case? Would you say that this is something that the industry should be embracing these things instead of being fearful of these new technologies?
I'm actually of the time frame of moving from ink and vellum, as I mentioned before, to CAD, and then going from planimeter, which is we used to call it bugging the cross sections. So I had to manually buggy the cross sections that we manually drew to figure out how much imported borrow or how much cut, so cut or fill, and how much material that we either have to excavate off, haul off, or we can retain on site. And we used to do that. And I remember that as we got into the software age, where the software design packages would do that calculation for me, in that transition, the older designers, because I was a junior civil or an assistant transportation engineer at the time, made me buggy the computer-generated cross-sections, and the computer would print out either the cut or the fill quantities, but they wanted me to check the computer work. Today, nobody would ask you to do that. But in those days, they were unsure whether the computer was calculating the amount correctly. And if you look back and you told a young person today that we used to have to do that, they would say that is ridiculous. It's a waste of time. And so we had draftspeople as well. So the draftspeople used to draft the plans, ultimate plans. They became CAD operators, probably made more money and probably did it a lot faster than they used to do it. And so I don't know about that transition because I wasn't a drafts person moving into a CAD operator, but I think ultimately it was probably better for them. It's kind of like when we transitioned from horse and buggy to car. I mean, we had a lot of blacksmiths running around putting horseshoes together and shoeing the horses. Today, there's not very many blacksmiths because there's not that many horses going down the roadway wearing out those horseshoes. And so there's a transition as technology gets smarter. And as I mentioned before, I don't think that DOTs are expanding much anymore. I think they're trying to better utilize or find ways of better utilizing their staff. And then again, being able to attract talent. Civil engineering, it's hard. Kids nowadays, at least, so I get to speak at UC Berkeley once a year to the graduate class for transportation. And they all want to be a tech. They want to do, like you, a startup company. We still need those civil engineers to make sure that we have somebody designing the rehabilitation of our existing infrastructure, and then maybe those areas where we need a widening or we need new infrastructure, you still need somebody to design that. And so how do we attract and keep those people in our industry? that's getting more and more difficult.
Yeah, and especially with the rise of remote work too, I believe it's probably hurting it a little bit as well because this industry is more of an, in person. You have to go to an office, you have to go on site. Where I think the younger generation they have opportunities to work remote. Where 20 years ago that wasn't even really an option. So I think that's another thing that's maybe competing with the industry is just the option to work remote. On top of it, maybe it can seem like it's more legacy systems and old, maybe not as quick to adopt certain technologies. Do you think that from a public infrastructure standpoint or from a public standpoint that's true where, working for a DOT, it could be more legacy systems? Is it harder to introduce new technologies into this industry because of the regulations that are involved, or?
No, I think that a lot of innovation starts at the state DOT level
Okay.
because they've got the resources and the people to analyze whether or not the technology is going to work or not going to work, and then see it filter down to the more of the local agencies. I don't, unless you're a real big city, I mean, a lot of times you contract out the work. I think that a lot of innovation has occurred because of certain state departments of transportation and probably large cities or maybe even some small cities, but innovation has to start at an agency somewhere. So the private sector will design something, bring it in, you'll vet it, and then if you adopt it, then it takes off. I mean, it's just like we started testing the first Intergraphs, the CAD machines, and these things were huge. They were double screen. I don't know, they were really, really expensive. And I had a boss, 𝘔𝘯𝘪𝘥𝘦, who one day called me in his office. I was eating a donut they had a bullpen, and Judy Alcorn was one of the secretaries there, and I was eating a maple bar, which I really like, and there was two sliding glass windows, and the slider would come out, and then it was either one of the deputy directors, deputy district director on the right, Erwin Rosa was on the right, 𝘔𝘯𝘪𝘥𝘦 was on the left, and I hear somebody saying Randy, and it wasn't, he wasn't, of course, talking to me, but there were 3 Randys in District 6 on the design floor. And so I wasn't even paying attention. And Judy said, "Did you hear Gordon? He was asking you a question." I said, "Excuse me, sir, I didn't hear the question." And because I wasn't paying attention. He said, "Come in my office." I went in his office, and he said, "Hey, how many CAD machines do we need to do all the plans on CAD?" I said, "Well, sir, with all due respect, that's above my pay grade. That's people like you are supposed to decide that." And he said, "Well, I read somewhere that you're the CAD coordinator for District 6. I said, "Well, yeah, I am, sir." And he said, "Well, then how many CAD machines do we need CAD coordinator?" I said, 14. Turned out it was close. And so we went through the, X amount of design squads. We need something for traffic. We need a CAD machine for hydraulics. He goes, "Get in the car, drive to Sacramento from Fresno, and tell the CAD people in Sacramento we want 14 CAD machines, and we'll double shift if we have to, and then we'll do all of our plans on CAD. We'll do nothing by ink." And that taught me that you need a leader in any agency that says, "I want this to happen. Go make it happen. This is the vision. Go make it happen." That's what. So all I told on my team is, "Hey, I want to reduce the amount of paper. Who's in? Let's do it." Okay. So they carried out the vision. I didn't carry out the vision. I had the vision. I said, "I want to pop progress on paperless." 𝘔𝘯𝘪𝘥𝘦 told me, "I want everything done on CAD." Okay, sir.
See, that's interesting because I was wondering, like, what's the change agent? Like, who is it at the DOT or I mean, it doesn't even have to be a DOT, but who is it that is the person that says, "All right, we need this technology, or we need to change, or we need to evolve from the way we're doing something now"? Is it like in this example, it seemed like there was like one person that was just, the leader in that sense, like, we need to do this. I wonder what made like him like come to that realization, like, because I'm thinking from like 4M's perspective, like, how do we begin to help the industry evolve and utilize technologies like 4M's utility AI mapping and analytics solution? How do we build that trust? How do we help the industry evolve?
Well, I think you're doing it probably the right ways. You're making sure that the technology is accurate and works.
Mm-hmm.
And you're starting to do more of that. You've run a pilot with District 5 at Caltrans, and so they liked the results. We've had meetings in headquarters with the planning and the design folks there at Caltrans. And Caltrans is, when I was there, people always complain about Caltrans. But at the end of the day, when the continent's fallen off into the ocean on Highway 1, and the Pacific Ocean is taking part of the continent, Caltrans is there, we open the road, or they open the road now. They'll soil and nail these cliffs together, they'll build soldier pile walls, and they'll restore transportation. And you want to get to those large DOTs that are innovative by nature. I mean, we used to always compete with Texas, Florida, Minnesota was really innovative. So Utah, there are these DOTs that kind of pop and surface up. They're doing some great things. And for the size of Caltrans, California and Caltrans, and let's say the size of Texas, some of these states are really small, but you get these big DOTs, and they've got a wide range of environmental issues. They got terrain issues. California, you got desert, you got high mountains, you got snow and ice. I mean, it's like got probably everything that you ever wanted to test, except for freezing sleet in the Central Valley. You're probably not going to find that, but you find that in the high Sierras.
Right.
I think that the strategy of trying to find those innovative organizations, agencies first is a good one. And I think that's where your advisory board comes into play, is that they probably know in their industries where you have a better than 50-50 chance of actually getting in the door and then having a conversation and then running a pilot.
Right.
And then I think ultimately the contractors, they don't want to hit anything. And so
you're
starting to talk to some of these major contractors because, that's their edge. You bid items, then you bid profit, and then you bid risk.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can lower the amount of risk, I don't know what percentage the contractors put into their risk category on each bid item, but it's there. And so what I try to do when I was at the Contra Costa Transportation Authority is I try to be the owner of choice. And so I would pay our contractors in 5 working days or less after that invoice was approved, because I wanted those subcontractors paid in 35 working days or less, because they're taking loans out to keep their businesses afloat, and I'm worried about them. So we try to pay our contractors faster than anybody else, try to treat our contractors with respect, and make sure they got paid with what we owed them, honest day's wage for an honest day's work. And I think it paid off. We used to get 8 to 10 bidders on our construction contracts. And granted, these weren't $5 billion or $2 billion, but when you talk about widening State Route 4, that was over $500 million. And then when we built the Caldecott, that was over $400 million. So there's some big construction packages that we got 10 bidders on. We even had bidders from Los Angeles bidding our work in the Bay Area. So that was pretty meaningful data for me. When I saw that, I said, well, we're on the right track.
Right. And it sounds like DOTs like Texas, California, it's very competitive. So it sounds like you guys are kind of looking at, what each other are doing. And if somebody's using maybe a certain technology that's helping them accelerate timelines or mitigate risk, you're more than likely going to probably look into what they're using. So being a pace setter or a leader, California having such big projects and being so innovative, I'm sure there's a lot of eyes obviously on California on what you guys are doing and how you guys are accelerating these project timelines and everything. So I think that's would help somebody like a 4M too. If Caltrans is using a 4M, there's going to be some eyes on that, because it sounds like other states are very competitive, almost like, I didn't think of it like that, like state to state as competitive. I view us as like one country. As long as America's moving forward and we're building our infrastructure for the future, that's the main goal. But there is some competition from state to state, it sounds like.
Well, it's a good example. So in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act under President Obama, California had the largest allocation of ERA money on the Caldecott Tunnel. It was 185 million. It was on the White House web page. And then I get a call from Amadeo Sainz from TxDOT. He was the executive director. I was the director of Caltrans. He was the executive director of Texas. They put 220 million on the Dallas-Fort Worth connector of ERA. And he goes, everything is bigger in Texas. So it gets very competitive, you know. So you got guys like Carlos Becerras. I mean, they're always looking out and seeing what's going on, and they're Carlos is doing a good job of marketing the innovations that is coming out of Utah DOT, and I see a lot of that more. And it's really a competitive. I mean, it's friendly competition. Cooperation. I think cooperation and competition. It's
Cooperation.
amongst the big DOTs for sure.
That cooperation, I haven't heard that before. You can coin that.
I think somebody else coined it. Again, I just copied it.
Oh, okay. Randy, what do you think AI can impact the most in terms of the construction life cycle? Like, where do you think technology and AI can make the biggest impact right now? Is it early on in the construction life cycle? Is it later on? Is it closer to construction when a shovel's in the ground? Is it the planning? Like, where do you think if we were going to double down and leverage AI that it could help the most in terms of infrastructure development?
Well, I think first you got to figure out with respect to AI is how accurate do you want it to be?
Okay.
If it's 99.9% or 100% accuracy, then AI is probably not going to be the way to go. If it's 85, 90% accurate or close, then I think it works. So I think you got to figure out what it is that you want to use artificial intelligence, machine learning for. I mean, I have in fact, that's what I was in Spokane talking about was AI in transportation. And I think that's important to get an understanding. It's not a cure-all for all your woes, but a good example is there's companies like Autodesk, Bentley, Oracle, Primavera. They're looking at using AI to look at schedule deviations early on. Whereas a human with spreadsheets can't figure out, I mean, you can, but it's going to take a lot of effort versus looking at all these data points and then the probability of success is diminishing because you've got these issues and it happens very, very quickly because the cost of storage and the cost of compute power is dropped. And so you can store all this massive amount of data and you can run these really complex models against that. And you can start seeing trends early on that the human eye may or may not be able to see. I think this is where data can help us in the project delivery side is early on setting the schedule. What's the probability of delivering on this schedule? Taking a look at risk and the risk as it appears. What is the probability of success at the end? You can run these scenarios over and over again. And if you don't like the outcome, you can change the model. I think that's where it's getting more sophisticated in our programming and then ultimately in the project delivery process. And then when you get to construction, the probability of success is probably there. Some are already using that. I mean, I would imagine big contractors are saying, okay, each item, how many items do we have on this project? Let's say it's delineators. How long does it take us to put a delineator in? What is the standard deviation of each of it? What is the ultimate cost? Is the terrain different, temperature different, whatever it is? Now you can run all those scenarios within that model on just one item, and then you just extend those items out. And now you're getting a pretty good view of every single item on a project. And then you can run calculations. Did the owner are we going to underrun by 75% or less? Or are we going to overrun by over 125%? Because we're going to adjust that item then for the spec. And now we're going to get, it's force account or it's time and materials cost. It's not bid item anymore. So as you adjust these items, you're going to end up getting more information. So what's good for the contractor is also good for the owner. And so the owner can start taking a look at what's the probability of underrunning, overrunning, all these different scenarios, and then ultimately get a better understanding of the outcome of a project. I think that's really where I see a lot of value in this AI ML world.
Yeah, and like it sounds like more just like a higher confidence, even if it's not going to be over 100% accurate. It's like how can we increase that confidence level? And it sounds like pre-planning in the early stages of construction is where we can make the biggest impact right now with using AI, because the early stages of construction, of course, every decision is built on the last decision. And if the first decision isn't based on reliable data, or it's obviously going to impact the whole construction lifecycle. And I know at 4M, that's where we cut our teeth, is in that early stages of infrastructure
Okay.
development, having reliable data as early as possible, because even if we still need boots on the ground to verify, put a hole in the ground that, there's a utility there, but there's no better way right now to access that information this early, this fast, this easy, right from your desk. And so it's just building that confidence level, because people ask us sometimes about accuracy as well. But we're never going to be on the ground putting a hole in the ground, and until you can actually see the pipe, that's 100% accurate. But we're increasing the confidence. You can be more confident in your planning and your design for these infrastructure projects that you're working on. So I think it's a very exciting time to be an infrastructure professional as well, because in order for us to build the future of America, to future-proof our infrastructure, I feel like we need to start embracing some of these technologies. Because, like you mentioned earlier too, having some difficulty getting some skilled labor into the industry has been a challenge. And we have very ambitious goals as a country. We have funding. We're getting funding from the infrastructure, bipartisan infrastructure law. There's a need. There's aging infrastructure, extreme weather. Whether you want to say it's on the rise or not, extreme weather is hurting our already aging infrastructure. We have a skilled labor shortage. How are we going to build the future of America without utilizing or embracing some new ideas and technologies? And so that's one of the reasons why I joined 4M. It's just because I think this is a great mission that's bigger than myself, and I'm a consumer of this infrastructure, even though I'm not the one planning, designing, building it. If I can help accelerate these timelines, keep projects on schedule, under budget, it's going to help me as a consumer, because then I can use this infrastructure without waiting very, very long for it. Randy, I had a couple more questions for you. One, I would love if you could describe 4M's value in one word or a sentence.
I think it's a reduction in risk reduction. That's the way I would say it. It's the ability to, again, it's not 100% accurate, but it's getting better and it's faster. And so you can actually get better information up front and then determine, do I need to change the right of way? I love the way you can run a geofence around your right of way, and then boom, you can get the information about sewage, water, telephone, whatever, fiber optic cable, all in that area. And you can say, holy moly, there's a lot of utilities in that area. Or you can get the high hazard ones around, like when you're running gas lines. We have in Contra Costa, we have a lot of refineries. And so when you're on that 80 corridor, we widened, or Interstate 680, we widened that. That was one of the projects. We widened it southbound and put an express lane in. Actually delivered that a year early during the pandemic. And actually got to change the work item from night to day, so it was less obtrusive. There's less noise and dust. There's the same amount of noise and dust, but it was while you're at work, not when you're sleeping. But if you can lower that risk and get a better understanding of what's in that corridor, you can really kind of pay closer attention to those areas because you got the information earlier. So I think risk avoidance or risk avoidance is probably the way I would describe that.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. That's risk avoidance. I know some of the other gentlemen on the board, I'm trying to remember what they said. I think Glenn said revolutionary. I believe Michael said game changer. But yeah, it's exciting, and it's still early days to see how this can evolve for 4M and how it can impact the industry. But obviously, having experts like you on board is a huge testament. And obviously, we all have a vested interest in the success of our nation's infrastructure. So I'm rooting for us, not from like an ego, or obviously I'm on the 4M analytics team here, but anything that we can do to lower risk, accelerate project timelines, be on budget is is great for the country as a whole. So Randy, I really wanted to say thank you so much. I know you're a wealth of knowledge. We're going to have to do a part 2, part 3 at some point. But thank you again for sharing your stories and your wisdom with me and everybody that was tuning in. I know everybody's going to find as much value as I did, I'm sure.
Well, thanks again, Chris. And maybe the word is exciting possibilities for 4M, for the owners to be able to geofence around their job requirements, project requirements, push a button, get information, analyze it very, very quickly, and then start negotiating and understanding what those agreements are. It's going to be very exciting possibilities and a lot of time savings involved as well. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is reduce the burden on the taxpayers, because they're ultimately the ones who use the facilities and who fund the facilities.
Yeah,
that's very important.
I'm into that. Anything that can lower my taxes, I'm all ears. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening that are agreeing with you, so Randy. So, well, thank you so much, Randy. I really appreciate it.
All right. Talk to you soon, Chris. Thanks.